There is a moment, quiet, fragile, almost imperceptible, when life begins to shift beneath your feet. You may not notice it at first. It comes in subtle symbols, the faint murmurs in the soul, a discomfort in places where you once felt safe. We often ignore these signs, but when change is near, real change, the kind that transforms not just your circumstances but your very self, it speaks through a deeper language. And so, this is not just a speech, it is a map for those who feel the stirrings of something vast and unknown approaching. Today we will uncover 5 signs, 5 psychic doorways, that often appear just before your life changes. Not merely externally, but in the deepest part of who you are. There comes a moment in life when the landscape around you remains unchanged, yet something within you begins to shift. You sit in the same room, at the same desk, among the same people, but it feels different, hollow, even suffocating. The laughter you once shared feels distant, the conversations repetitive, and the days blur together in a kind of grey fog. You may try to shake it off, to be grateful, to remind yourself that nothing is technically wrong, but deep in your chest, something whispers, this no longer fits. This quiet restlessness is not a flaw or a failure, it is a sign. When your soul begins to stir against the boundaries of a once comfortable existence, it is because you have outgrown it. The environment hasn't changed, you have. And this friction, this inner unease, is the psyche's way of initiating transformation. It rarely announces itself with clarity. It comes as boredom, as irritation, as a longing you can't name. But it is no less significant than thunder. You begin to feel like a stranger in your own life. The job that once made you proud now feels like a performance. The relationships that once anchored you now seem to tether you. Even your habits, the ones that once soothed you, begin to feel like rituals of avoidance. Consider the woman who worked in finance for over a decade. On paper, her life was ideal: stability, recognition, security. But each Monday, a heaviness pressed down on her chest, and each Friday brought only temporary relief. The joy had vanished, though she couldn't explain why. She stayed in that discomfort long enough to realize it was trying to speak to her. Not with logic, but with feeling. Within a year, she had traded skyscrapers for dusty roads in rural India, launching a non-profit to educate young girls. She didn't plan it from the start. She simply followed the unrest, let it guide her to something truer. That inner discomfort was not her downfall, it was her awakening. Restlessness, though often feared, is sacred. It is not the end of contentment, it is the beginning of truth. The psyche knows when you have reached the edge of a chapter. It begins to withdraw your energy from what no longer serves your becoming. Like a plant that outgrows its pot, you begin to feel root-bound in familiar spaces. If you ignore it, the discomfort deepens. But if you listen, truly listen, it will lead you somewhere vast and alive. This inner voice is not here to ruin what you've built. It's here to reveal what you're capable of next. It will not give you easy answers, only a growing sense that where you are is no longer where you're meant to be, and that is how it begins. Not with certainty, but with a question. Is this it? In that question lies the entire journey ahead. There is a strange kind of repetition that begins to haunt you when you are on the threshold of profound change. It's as if life, like a quiet and determined teacher, hands you the same lesson over and over until you are ready to understand it, not with your intellect, but with your whole being. You find yourself caught in familiar disappointments, drawing the same kinds of people into your orbit, watching scenarios unfold that feel eerily familiar. These patterns are not coincidences, and they are certainly not punishments. They are reflections, mirrors held up to your inner world, asking you to look more closely. We often think we are moving forward, that the past is behind us, but then the same wounds reopen, just dressed in different clothing. You try harder, love stronger, aim higher, but the results remain the same. The promotion slips away, the partner withdraws, the project collapses. You begin to feel cursed or broken or deeply unlucky. But in truth, you are simply being invited to face something essential within yourself that you have been unwilling or unable to see. The outer world is echoing your inner landscape. There was once a man who seemed, time after time, to fall in love with women who couldn't commit. No matter how kind, patient, or attentive he was, each relationship ended with the same phrase, "I'm not ready." At first he blamed them, then himself, then fate. But one evening, standing alone in his apartment, surrounded by memories of yet another failed connection, he asked a question he had never dared ask before. Why do I keep choosing this? That single question shattered the surface of his self-condescending. He realized he had always sought out the emotionally unavailable because true intimacy terrified him. As a child, love had been unpredictable, tied to performance and silence. He had learned that closeness meant danger, vulnerability meant pain, so he unconsciously chose what was familiar over what was healthy. When he finally saw the pattern for what it was, a defense, not a destiny, he began to change. The next time love came, it looked different, and this time he didn't run. These repetitive cycles are not there to torment us, they are invitations. They exist because some part of you, long buried and long ignored, is crying out to be healed. The pattern is the message. And until you understand it, until you let it guide you inward, you will keep spinning in its loop. Not because you are weak or flawed, but because your soul refuses to let you move forward while dragging the weight of the unexamined behind you. So when the same heartbreak comes knocking, when the same failure reappears, when the same conflict erupts, pause, ask not, why is this happening to me, but what in me is trying to speak through this? Because once you dare to look into that mirror and meet the self you've been avoiding, everything begins to shift, and what once felt like fate becomes a doorway into freedom. There comes a time when the world as you know it begins to unravel, not all at once, but in quiet, cutting pieces. A friend you thought would be there forever stops calling. A job you once found meaning in is taken from you, or perhaps you walk away, unsure of why, only knowing you cannot stay. The dream you clung to for years, one that shaped your choices, your sense of self, suddenly seems hollow, like a house built for someone else. In these moments it feels like everything is slipping through your fingers. You try to hold on, to patch the leaks, to salvage what once brought you security and identity, but the more you resist, the more fragmented everything becomes. It feels like loss, and it is, but not the kind meant to destroy you. Rather, it is the kind that strips away what no longer belongs to make space for what is aching to be born. This shedding is not cruel, it is necessary. You are being asked to release roles, relationships, and self-emotions that have expired. The old masks no longer fit. The roles you've played out of habit, obligation, or fear begin to crumble. And it feels like death. In a way, it is, but it is the death of illusion, not of life. Many who have walked through this fire emerge not diminished but expanded. In a psychological study of post-traumatic growth, over half of the participants reported that their greatest pain became the very ground upon which they built a deeper sense of purpose and inner strength. They did not just recover, they transformed. But none of them planned it that way. They were first broken open, often by force. What they lost cleared a path. There is a woman who spent years defining herself as a wife and mother. When her marriage ended and her children left home, she was left staring at an empty table and a deeper emptiness inside. At first she wept for what was gone, but slowly she began to ask, "Who am I now?" In that question she began to find herself, not the version shaped by others' needs, but a deeper voice that had long been buried under duty and routine. That voice led her back to painting, something she had loved before life told her to be practical. What was lost had carved out the space for what had been waiting. This kind of loss feels unfair, even cruel when it arrives, but it is the soul's way of making room. It is not chaos, it is reordering. You are not being punished, you are being returned to something truer. Just as a snake cannot grow without shedding its old skin, you cannot expand while clinging to what you've outgrown. The life you were meant for cannot begin until the life you settled for ends, and though it may feel like you are falling apart, you are, in fact, falling into alignment. There is a peculiar stirring that arrives uninvited, often during the quietest moments, perhaps when you're washing dishes, walking alone, or lying awake at night. It does not roar, it whispers, a soft nudge, an idea, a vision, a desire to make something that has never existed before. It may come as the urge to write words you didn't know you carried, or to paint despite not picking up a brush in years. It might call you to plant a garden, learn an instrument, start a small business, or simply speak truths you've kept locked inside. And though it may feel strange or even foolish at first, this sudden need to create is no accident. It is not vanity, it is emergence. Something within you, something ancient, patient, and essential, has waited for permission to live. And in these moments it finally begins to rise. Not because your life is perfect or finally in order, but precisely because a deeper order is beginning to unfold. The soul does not wait for stability to speak. It speaks to summon you toward meaning. Creativity is not reserved for artists or dreamers. It is the language of transformation. It is how the unconscious begins to shape the visible world, one spark at a time. Consider the woman who boarded a delayed train with nothing to her name but uncertainty. Out of that space a simple image appeared, a boy with glasses and a lightning scar. She did not know why, or what it would become. But she listened, she wrote, and though doors closed and rejection came again and again, she persisted. Not for fame, she had none. Not for money, she had none of that either. But because something in her had to be written. What began as a whisper became a world, and in doing so, changed not only her life, but the lives of millions. This is what happens when the soul begins to awaken. It doesn't ask for permission. It creates a restlessness that can't be solved with logic. You may begin to feel discontent, not because something is wrong, but because something more truthful wants to be born. And you cannot birth it through analysis alone. You must engage with it. You may find yourself painting at midnight, scribbling in journals you never planned to share, building something no one asked for but that your heart insists upon. That insistence is the call. It is not random. It is the part of you that has remained silent, waiting, while you played the roles the world expected. When you feel this pull to create, you are not losing your mind, you are reclaiming your soul. You are stepping into a dialogue with your true self. And in that act, whether anyone sees it or not, something divine is set in motion. You become more than you were. You become the bridge between what was and what wants to be. And that, quietly and courageously, is how change begins. There comes a quiet moment when the rush of daily life slows just enough for something deeper to surface. You stumble upon an old photograph, and the faces, your own included, seem like ghosts from another time. Or perhaps you glance at the calendar and realize that entire seasons have passed in a blur, and you cannot recall where the days have gone. You start counting time not in hours or months, but in years, in decades, and for the first time you feel the weight of it. Not with panic, but with a kind of solemn reverence. Time, once endless in your youth, now feels like sand, slipping too quickly through the fingers. This is not a crisis, it is a signal. The soul, when it senses your life is moving without depth, will remind you of its limits. Not to frighten you, but to wake you. Mortality has a way of cutting through the noise, of bringing clarity where there was once distraction. You begin to ask questions you had always postponed. Have I loved well? Have I created anything that mattered? If I were to leave this world tomorrow, what would I regret never having done? There was once a man in his early 60s who had spent a lifetime in the corporate world. He was good at it, respected, accomplished, admired. But after attending the funeral of a close friend, something shifted. That night, he wrote just one line in his journal. "If I died tomorrow, would I have done what I was born to do?" The next morning, he handed in his resignation. Friends called him impulsive, family called him foolish, but he knew something they didn't, that the ache he had felt for years was not about his job, but about purpose. He became a teacher. He stood in front of students, many the age of his own grandchildren, and shared not only knowledge but wisdom born of time. In those final years, he was more alive than in the decades that came before. When you become aware of time, truly aware, you begin to live differently. The small things, grudges, appearances, fear of failure, begin to lose their grip, and what rises in their place is a fierce longing to make meaning of what time you have. You stop waiting for permission. You stop pretending that tomorrow is guaranteed. You begin to live, not just efficiently, but intentionally. That urgency you feel is sacred. It is the soul urging you to no longer postpone your becoming. So when time starts to feel fragile, lean in. Let it strip away what doesn't matter. Let it guide you to what does, because in the face of mortality, truth has nowhere left to hide, and the life you were meant to live begins not with answers, but with the courage to ask, am I truly living or just surviving? The moment that question takes root, everything begins to change. If you find yourself in these signs, restlessness, patness, loss, creative urges, or a new awareness of time, do not run. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. Change does not come wrapped in certainty. It arrives disguised as doubt, loss, and longing. But if you listen, really listen, you will hear it calling you toward the life waiting just beyond the known. The truth is this: you are not who you were. And that's exactly how you'll know your life is about to change.